Okay, says the Mechaba in Siman Reish Pei Beis Si'if Dalet. Noyagin Likres Shiva. The minhag is we call up 7 people for aliyahs on Shabbos morning. Veligmar Emohem HaParsha. We finish off reading the entire Parsha with those 7. V'omer Kaddish, and then after Kriyas HaTorah you say Kaddish. V'chayze v'koyre im hamafte mashekara hashvi. And then you read Mafta. Mafta is what you laned with the 7th aliyah. So let's just do the Mishnah Berurah on that. Says the Mishnah Berurah Yudches Noagin. Mashenoagu limker shishi b'fnei atzmei. There is a minhag apparently in some shuls that you would auction off, you would sell the shishi, the 6th aliyah. It's considered the most prestigious. Yesh k'tzas smach me'azoh shlach lecha. And there is a reference to this, an allusion to it, apparently from the Zohar and Shlach lecha. Va'achron meichrin b'fnei atzmei. One can also sell the 7th aliyah, da'achron chaviv, because it's more important, shemisayim by, because you conclude with it. So there's a whole debate which are the most choshev aliyahs. Of course, they're all choshev, as I'll say in a second. But some say shlishi, some say shishi, some say shvi. They're all different. Sources for different aliyahs. But the main thing is you shouldn't argue about which aliyah to get. Because every single letter in the Torah is Kodesh and Tahir. Okay, Likris Shiva. So we call up 7 aliyahs. Tehine minadin kaimelon the mafte oil lemin Shiva. Because mi'ikar din, actually the 7th aliyah could be mafta. The person called up shvi. That could count as mafta. For hoyochel ligmar haparsha, dahainu hasedra imam mafta, shu hashvi v'achach lemekadesh. You could just have 7 aliyahs, and the 7th aliyah counts as mafta as well, and then you say kaddish. However, v'ach they lot says gam das ha'omer b'gemara de'ein mafta oile min shiva. There is an opinion in the Gemara which says that mafta does not count as the shiva aliyahs. And this is what we do. We lane the entire parsha and we call up 7 people, and then we do mafta. To show everybody to show that the mafta is actually not one of the 7. We therefore have a little gap. We say kaddish after kriyas HaTorah, ben kriyas lekriyas shar ha'olim, between the kriya of mafta and the previous aliyahs. And therefore we have to finish the entire parsha, the entire kriyas HaTorah, to not and then say kaddish, because if we were to stop and we would double up mafta with shvi, or the end of shvi, then you're saying kaddish in the middle of kriyas HaTorah. You can't do that. So therefore we lay in the whole sedra, we say kaddish, and then we do mafta. And therefore we do mafta afterwards, having completed the whole parsha, and you've got to have at least 3 psukim from what was laid in shvi or achron, whatever it was. Okay, v'ligmar imohim haparsha. So we said we conclude the parsha. V'hu adin the yochel ha'osif oid ala shiva. And like we said previously, you can actually have more than 7 aliyahs if needed. But the point is that we don't finish off with mafta. That's a parsha v'achach lemakadesh. Eleyom makadesh kodim kriyas hamafta. But rather, what we do is we lay in the whole sedra. We then say kaddish, and then we do mafta. And therefore, memela, you've got to finish off the whole sedra before saying kaddish. Like we said in the previous sif. Okay, good. Now says the Ramah, back to the top. V'chein noagim b'yontov, and that indeed is the minhag in yontov she'ein maftir meminyan hakrum. That we don't we call up the person for mafta as one of the essential aliyahs. Aval b'chol, however, during the week she'also lahosif aminyan hakrum, you cannot go more than 3 on a Monday, Thursday morning, for example. You can't say, you know what, I've got a lot of chiyuvim here today. Let's make 6 or 7 aliyahs. You can't do that. Therefore, when it comes to a place where you need to do mafta, for example, on a tanis or something like that, hashlishi hu maftir, the 3rd aliyah automatically gets mafta because you can't make it a 4th. Of the yom shemotzin shnei sefarim, in the day where you bring 2 or 3 sefarim out, ha maftir kore ba'achrona, the mafta actually is called up last. Okay, let's do the Mishabur on that. Chaf Aleph. V'chein nagim b'yontov rotzolema. Shegam b'yontov af medina hoyem muta hamaftir liyos min amin chamisha. Even on Yontov where you have 5 aliyahs, strictly speaking, the maftir could be the 5th aliyah. Mikol makom nagin gamkein she'ein hamaftir min yanin. The minhag is not to call up the maftir as one of the 5. Elakerb if they atzma b'Parshas shechovos hayom. V'kadish oime mekodim. You do the kriya of that day, then you do kaddish, and then you do the maftir. Mikol makom yotzi b'zeh af leman da'amad da'oile min aminyan. She'irov ha'poskim soivim demuta lahosif v'chanal. You're allowed to be Mosif if you need to. Okay, good. Chaf Beis, Oishleisha. So when you have 3, Kagoin, Rosh Chodesh Teves Shechol B'Shabbos. So yeah, this is going on the continuation of the Ramah. So he said over the Yom Shemotzian 2 or 3 Sfarim. I mean, that's what's going on. That Hamafte Kare Achrona says the Mishnah Berurah Chaf Beis, Kagoin, Rosh Chodesh Teves Shechol B'Shabbos. So Rosh Chodesh Teves, which falls on a Shabbos, that's Shabbos Chanukah. So you've got a lot going on that day. Shetzorech Likros Parshas HaShavua, or Parshas Rosh Chodesh, Ve'inyan Shel Chanukah. Those are the 3. Oy B'Simchas Torah, for example, Shetzorech Likros Parshas V'zes HaBracha, or Bereshis, or Parshas Musafim. Yeah, you've got mafta to read the Musafim of that day. V'chol Zeh Maftim Bilvad, Kar B'Achrona. And in all of these situations, mafta is read B'Achrona at the very end. Or Vein K'Shemeshalmin HaMinyan, or Shemesifin HaMinyan, whether you have you have the exact amount that you needed, 5 for the Yontif or 7 for the Shabbos, or whether you add on to that, Hakol Olim B'Shnei Sefarim HaRishonim, that's all included in the first 2 of the Sefarim that you have brought out. Okay, now let's go back. Now what the Ramah is going to finish off and talk about is, can you call up a cotton on special occasions? For example, on the Parshas Zachor or Parshas Parah and things like that. Now we're not talking about laning. The kriya itself, for sure you need an adult. We'll see in the Mishnah Berurah. But the question is, can you call up a cotton for mafta on Parshas Zachor or on Parshas Parah or other times? So let's take a look at the Ramah. The cotton yochel likros b'Parshas HaMusafin. You're allowed to call up a cotton on the Parsha of Musafin, or Parshas Shemesifin Ba'adar, or one of the Parshas that we add in Adar. And that is the minhag afal pi sheyesh cholkin, even though those who disagree. And then we say kaddish before we call up the maftir. It doesn't make a difference if there were 7 or more than 7. Or you have one sefer or another, it doesn't make a difference. You finish off the kriya of that day, you then say kaddish, and then you call up the maftir. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah Chaf Gimel, even though one of the 4 of the Arba Parshas is Parshas Zachor, which is a chiyuv min ha-Torah, sheyishmo'ena kol adam Yisrael, v'hakoten she'ena mechuyev b'dava ein yochel etziam. Yeah, that you can't get him to read, to lane, because he is not mechuyev min ha-Torah to be, zocher the mechias hamolik, and therefore he can't be yotzi other people. Yedei chova. Mikol makom hari achshav hashliach tzibur koireh. Nowadays, there's a Golker who does it, and therefore, back in the day, you got called up, then that person would lane. I recently got an aliyah somewhere, and the person who got called up, the guy before me, or the guy after me, he got called up, and he just laned. He asked the Golker, and he just did it. Very nice. But that was back in the day that everyone did that. But nowadays, you have a dedicated, designated Golker, and he lanes. So to call up a cotton for Parshas Zachor technically should be okay because he's not actually laning. However, so the Ramah says, therefore the cotton yochel likros, even though there are those who choylek. V'yesh machmirin, I'm in the first white line in the Mishnah Berurah. V'yesh machmirin b'davar shel likros lekotton leParshas Zachor. You don't call up a child for an aliyah on Parshas Zachor, v'chein leParshas Parah, nor do you call up a cotton on Parshas Parah to get the aliyah for mafta. Sheyesh omer shegam hi midaraisa. Now, if you look at 36 and 37, 2 interesting and short notes. 36, v'af na'ar b'shabbos shekodim habar mitzvah. Even a child who's before his bar mitzvah, Hayragon Yisrael Yaakov Kanievsky, the Slipler, Shlo Yale Lemafta b'Parshas Zachor El Yale b'Shabbos shekodim lochen. So if you've got a kid whose mitzvah is Parshas Zachor, so he says to not call him up for mafta. He for sure can't read those few psukim. because we need to be a Gadol D'Oraisa, and we're not sure, if he's certainly for a cotton you can't read. Bar mitzvah boy, if he's definitely a Gadol, he's got Shtei Saras, then he can. But if he's not, then he certainly can't lane. But calling him up, so that's the debate, that's the two opinions, and therefore the Ramah says you can. Cotton yochel likres, all the Parshas of our Parshas, however yesh cholkim. But what he's saying in footnote 36 is that a child in the kodim of the bar mitzvah, really he should get the aliyah the Shabbos before. To avoid this. And 37, also very interesting, because strictly speaking, when you get the aliyah, you should read with the balkora, not in too loud a voice to disturb him, but just so that you should be reading with him. It's appropriate not to call up an Amoretz or a blind person for Parshas Zachor or Parshas Para, because technically speaking, he's got to read with the Balkora, and an Amoretz or a Summa, a blind person, may not be able to do that. V'chein hiskim ben Yerabba. Came back to the Mishnah Berurah. I'm in the middle of the second line. V'chein hiskim ben Yerabba v'derech Chaim. Good. Of Yom Rishon shel Shavuos shekoin hamerkava lemafta. On the first day of Shavuos, we have very choshev haftarah. It's ma'aseh merkava. Again, we should v'chein b'shvi shel Pesach shekoin hashira or v'shabbos shuva gam kein noagin she'ein koin nosu lechatchil lemafta. We try and avoid cooling up a cotton on those special days. He writes that me'ika, a cotton should not be called up on the 4 parshas. Anytime we're talking about calling up a cotton for mafta, we're only talking about a cotton who is zigir lechinuch. You can articulate the words properly. Not like those who allow any cotton to do it. It's like Anus Miras that we allow him to do the Haftarah. That we shouldn't be like that. It's got to be at least the age of chinuch, and he's got to be able to read properly. Okay, and then the Ramah says, "Afa pisha yesh cholkim, hainu the cholkim tzrilu the cholkim hold davka b'Shabbos shekora hamafta mashekva kora hashvi oz nuchel likris cotton." Only on those occasions where you're repeating what was said at Shvi can you call up a cotton. But here, in these cases, they're different, because the mafta you read is not just a repeat of the Shvi, but the mafta you read is a standalone, separate mafta. So on that, the Yesh Cholkim say that you shouldn't call up a cotton for that, because this is a standalone new mafta, and you should call up a gadol. Va'omrim Kaddish. It says the Mishnah Berurah in Chof Hei, Lo chidish b'zeh klum ala machaba. He's not really adding anything to what the machaba said. Rak lashmin and mashasim lebesoif to ein chiluk. And b'chol pam omrim kaddish koydem amafta dafka. I.e., just to repeat that idea that you do kaddish after Kriyas HaTorah before you call up the maftir. Okay, Chof Vav koydem she'el hamaftir hainu b'Shabbos. Ava b'chol she'hamaftir min yakruim. But of course, in the weekday, for example, a tanis where you do Haftarah, and it's shlishi is the maftir. Omrim kaddish acha maftir. In that situation, of course, you do kaddish after the maftir. Once you finish laning, you put the sefer Torah back, and then you say kaddish. You can only say kaddish once you've completed the number of aliyahs that you need. Only after the 4th aliyah has happened, because then you've completed the numbers that you need. Good. Okay, next sif. Hey. If you haven't got someone who knows how to do haftarah, but the only person who can do haftarah is someone who's already had an aliyah. And the shliach tzibur has already said kaddish now that you finish laning. Okay, you got to call him up again. Because although he's had an aliyah earlier, a short while earlier, you need to call him up again for mafta. And he makes the bracha before and after his aliyah. Says the Ramah, but if you haven't yet said kaddish, what the best eitzah to do is the guy who got shvi, let him just be the person to do maftir, im yodea, if he knows how to. And to avoid, to try and avoid calling up someone who's already had an aliyah if possible. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah Chaf Zayin, im lo nimtza, v'hu hadin b'Shabbos shel chazoin. Yeah, the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av. Afilu nimtza misha yedei lahafte b'novi rak shelo yoda lekeinin knohug. Kein dina gam kein dina hachi. It's the same thing because on the Haftarah of Parshas Chazayin, it's actually quite a tricky Haftarah to do because you've got to do some of it in the Eichenigan and some not. And it's hard to know which bits to do in the Eichenigan and which not, and also just to float in between. It's for most people. It's I know one Rav told me that it's his nightmare because they mechabed him, and he doesn't find laning. He's not so musical, and to go in and out of the Eichenigan, he said he finds it very difficult. But look at 46. Here's very interesting. Minhag Chazanish. That shekorim es haftarah benigun haragil shall kol yemos hashana. He says that part of the haftarah for Shabbos Chazayin you do in the regular Shabbos nigun, and he gives a good svara. V'tam hadav v'kosav b'sefer zeh hashulchan shekashem shenagu lilbus b'Shabbos Chazayin bigdei Shabbos kach yesh likra es haftarah benigun haragil. If you're wearing regular bigdei Shabbos, so then do the Shabbos nigun as well. Don't start doing the eichen nigunim. Okay, I don't think that's the minhag. The minhag, what's the minhag here? To do an eichen to flip. Yeah. Okay. Tzarech lachzav likreis. Lechadaydi. Mizogan lechadaydi. Yeah. I remember in the Mir once it was Purim Meshulish, and therefore in Yerushalayim, so it was Friday, Shabbat, Sunday, and on that Friday night they allowed the Baal Tefillah to sing lechadaydi. Nowadays I think it's different. Yeah. Now in those days there wasn't such a. They say it, but nowadays I think they sing lechadaydi. It was a special dispensation. Anyway, tzarich lachzav likreis kafches. Va'afilu hashvi reitz lahaftir. Tzarich lachzav likreis. You got to lane it again. He's got to say the aliyahs again. Kim shivzik b'kadosh, because you said kaddish and therefore you got to cool him up again. He says the brachas even though he had an aliyah previously. Hanechnosim lo yedu shezeh mafte. Because if you just allow him to stand there and to just read mafta without the brachas, late comers, that's pretty late, or people who were nipped out earlier and then they just come in, people will think that he didn't do they didn't know that he had an aliyah previously. It could be zoyin la Torah. Because I mean in the Gemara, they cover that Torah that you've got to actually do the brachas beforehand. Else cover that Torah. The hainu the hamafta yafta b'neviim v'varech olav v'lo yikru b'Torah, that if you don't lane first, hari onu meshavim divrei hanavim l'Torah b'kriya b'bracha, you're equating Torah with neviim. Lochein tzorich likros hamafta b'Torah tchila. That's why we lane first from the Torah. Or mizeh yiru she'Torah ikaris, and that shows that Torah is the ikar. Or mikol malkum. The best thing to do is to call someone who had previously and not to call someone who had shvi. Okay, yafta misha Allah. Yafta benovi. Ve'ein tzorech lachzav likros b'Torah. In that situation where kaddish was not said, then you can just call up the person who had the aliyah can just be maftir the novi. Elamashekar b'shvi b'siyum parsha oishasifu mishekar b'achron oilegam lemaftir. That will just count as the maftir. Because we've established that the maftir can technically count as the seventh aliyah. In that situation where you go straight in to the where the maftir sort of was doubled up, and therefore you go straight into haftarah. In that situation, you need a kaddish still, but you can do it after the haftarah, after the brachas, after the end of the haftarah. In any situation as well, when you forgot to say kaddish, and you remember after that Torah, whoops, we forgot to say the kaddish after Kriyas Torah. Lo yomar kaddish ad achale Kriyas Torah b'chaseh, that you shouldn't say kaddish at that point. It's too late. Im yodea, so we only give it to somebody who knows how to. Ve'im hashvi ein yodea, and if the shvi does not know how to do the haftarah, v'yistorach lalis lamafte acher echad min hakodim, you have to call up somebody from the previous people, the previous aliyahs. Oz b'chol gavni tzorach lasav v'likros levorach b'Torah l'shem mafte. Then for sure you need to read the mafter again and make the brachas, etc. Lamed Aleph, what's this going on? But if there is somebody else who knows how to say haftarah, you should try and avoid calling up somebody who you called up previously. that day. Lo yaftir or b'Shabbos chazoin b'mokum shamina kerina harav lemaftir, where the Rav gets the kibbud. Lo yikra'uhu mikodim l'shlishi. You shouldn't call him shlishi, which the minhag in many shuls, the Rosh Shiva or the Rav gets shlishi. On that Shabbos in Hasidic places it's shlishi, but in more Litvish places it's shlishi. Then on Shabbos chazoin, don't call him out for shlishi because he'll get his aliyah for mafta. Okay, Misha Olakva, Im Korla Odom Luter Beis Haknes Acheres, if a person had an aliyah in another shul, and his damano is a Parshas Kor Hayoim, Tzorach Lachsav Levarach, he still has to do it again. Okay, good. Next sif. Im Ta'o Shliach Tzibur, V'siyim HaParsha Im HaShishi, V'om HaKadosh. Now, if a Shliach Tzibur messed up, and V'siyim HaParsha Im HaShishi, V'om HaKadosh, he just carried on laning. So imagine you call up the first 6 aliyahs, and for Shishi, instead of stopping at Shvi, he just went right through to the end of the parsha. What you do? So in Tov Shliach Tzibur, the Golker, V'sim HaParsha Im HaShishi V'om HaKadosh, and then he said Kaddish, Ein Tzorech Likros Oidacher. You don't actually need to call up a 7th person. Why? Ela Yikra Im HaMafta Mashikor Im HaShishi. Because you're going to call up someone for mafta, and the Chaim the mafta oilam in yeshiva, and the mafta can technically be your 7th aliyah, and that's what you should do in that situation. Vov says in Mishnah Berurah, ein sorech likros, rotzoloma she'ein sorech likros oid shvi milvat hamafta. You don't have to call a 7th aliyah in addition to mafta. The achri shama kaddish b'sim ha'parsha ein oker achach rak l'shem mafta, because the 7th aliyah you're only doing l'shem mafta levad k'mei shirogel tomid achach kiddush kaddish. Sorry, v'hu yeh oil leminyan. Shiva, and therefore the mafta will be number 7. If, however, you remember that, hey, the guy went all the way through to the end before the Kaddish, then you should actually call up a 7th aliyah and let him repeat what was just said in error, and then finish off, say Kaddish, and then you do mafta as normal. And in that situation, you don't need to repeat Kaddish again. Zayin, Kara HaParsha B'Tfilah Shachris. B'Shabbos V'Dilig Posich Echad. Now this is interesting halacha. What if you realize that after, later on, after you finish the laning, someone said, didn't he miss out that posuk? He missed out even a word, and you only realize afterwards. So Korah HaParsha B'Tfilah Shachris B'Shabbos V'Dilig Posuk Echad, and you missed out a posuk. Choyze V'Korehu V'Shnayim. You got to lane again, and you got to add 2 psukim. You can never lane just 1 posuk. You got to have at least 3 psukim. V'Afilu Hifter V'Spala Musaf Choyze V'Koreh. Even if you've already said mafta, you've already done musaf, and someone said, hey, he missed out a posuk, you got to take the Sefer Torah again and lane at least 3 psukim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, hu adin teva achas, even 1 word. Because often a person can miss a posuk rather than a word. Okay, let's just quickly do Reish Pei Gimel. It's very, very short. Reish Pei Gimel, Lama ein metzin shnei Sefer Torah b'Shabbos. Masha ein metzin b'Shabbos. Very interesting question. All the rest, all the Yom Tovim, you bring a second sefer because you have a special maftir. It's on the carbonus of that Yom Tov, of that day. So why don't you do the same on Shabbos? You can read Parshas Vayera or Parshas Lech Lecha, and there should be a second sefer Torah every Shabbos because you need to read Uvayom Shabbos, the musaf that you bring on that day. But we don't do that. Why not? Masha'ein metzin b'Shabbos sefer sheni likres Parshas HaMusafim mipnei she'ein bo ele shnei psukim, because there's only 2 psukim, and therefore it wouldn't be a good mafta anyway. Says in Mishnah Berurah, ve'ein kari b'Torah pachas mishleish psukim u'chodel b'sim kuf lam zayin. They start from psukim shelo minyanoi shel yom efsha, and to just add on psukim which are not related and not relevant, that's not possible. V'ataisus chos v'oitam. Taisus gives another reason. V'fishetzorech lahavte b'novi b'chol Shabbos minyanoi shel yom. The whole idea is you've got to lane from the novi of the laning of the day. V'ikrin shb'shal Shabbos. But if every Shabbos we're going to do the same 2 psukim of the Korban Musaf, imkain yetzorech lahavte b'desalik minei, you got to do the haftarah on what you just finished off on. V'hainu minyan Shabbos, imkain you call haftarahs me'inyan echad. Every single haftarah will be the same. So therefore, we don't do a second sefer to do the kriyas haftarah of the Musafim on Shabbos. Okay.
How many simonim